Hello, everyone. This is Charisma, and this is my healing journey. Happy New Year's, everybody. Please ignore this big, humongous sit. I hate it, but whatever it is, what it is. I've got something important that I want to talk about that's been on my mind for a long time since I started this YouTube channel, and it's telling the whole and complete unadulterated truth about what I've been through. Um, it's hard because I've been holding a lot of this inside for a very long time. I don't think that I've even discussed these things with um, any therapist. Um, Not this particular story, but the time is now. I'm ready. I'm ready. So let's get into it. Let's talk about the time when I was 13 years old when my aunt told me to kill myself. Yeah. And I think the reason why it took almost 20 years, because this happened when I was 13, and the thing that's taken me so long to talk about it is the shame and guilt that I had placed on myself about what somebody else had done to me, because it's not my guilt, it's not my shame to bear. And the more I chip away at that false belief system that I've been holding on to for so long, then the easier it is to tell my story. And the two reason why I tell my story is because I want people to who have been through this type of abuse, from people who should have loved you and who should have cared about you, and but they didn't for whatever reason, maybe because they wasn't capable of doing so. And to give survivors of this type of sexual, emotional, physical, psychological trauma and abuse, validation, to provide validation for their pain, their suffering, to know that they're not alone and that there's somebody out there who understands what you have faced, what you've suffered, what you've went through. This is the number one reason why I do the videos that I do. And I do want to touch on other things like how to's, just different ministry. God has a ministry He's placed inside of me, but there's no point of reference that anybody is going to have unless they know my testimony, unless they know what I've been through and where I'm coming from and how I'm getting this knowledge from, because it can almost be like, who are you to tell me A, B, and C? You don't know what I've been through, honey. Yes, I have. Yes, I do. And let me tell you the number one story. So yeah, I don't know, like when I was growing up, and back home in Indianapolis, and a lot of times when I was facing the things that I was facing, there was nobody. It's like there was nobody to turn to. There was nobody who I could talk to and tell what was happening. I shuffled between my grandfather and my aunt's home, and one would be abusive to me to the point I couldn't take it no more. So I'd run away to the house of the other, and it's like this ping pong effect. One got mad at me, they would sick the other one on me. It was a whole toxic situation. But when you're 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, in all these ages, you don't know how to articulate this. You don't understand what's going on. It's your normal. It hurts. It doesn't feel good. But you don't know that you're capable of getting help. You don't know how to get help. I didn't know how to get help. I didn't know how to make the abuse stop, from both their ends. And on particular, we'll talk about my aunt. My aunt, she is my father's half sister. They share the same mother, who is my grandmother. And my father died when I was 4 years old from tragic circumstances we'll get into in a later video. So my mom, by this time, I'm in the wind. She signed over her parental rights because of the things that she's had done to me. Um, Beating me, molesting me, as I've talked about in an earlier video. So it's so funny. I used to love, I can remember my very first memories of my aunt. You know, uh, they were pretty good. She's very, I think that's might be where I get my, you know, working with children. She was very good with me as a child, and children do love her. Children like her a whole lot as well. And she was really good with me. I adored my aunt. Every time she came over, I loved her. Auntie so and so, won't say her name, but I loved her. It's like she could talk to me and get on my level as a 3, 4 year old. Like she had that ability, and the same ability that my grandfather had as well. So, but I remember, I can tell you the a point when our relationship changed. It might have been, I was 5, so it might have been a year to a year and a half after my father had first passed, and she told me, "You can call me mom from now on." And I declined to do so. I said, "No, I don't want to call you mom because you're not my mother." And I remember the hurt and the pain in her face. I know I hurt her feelings. And, you know, I know I hurt her feelings, but at the same time, I didn't want to call her mom. I did not want to call her mom because there was an emptiness deep down inside of me. And I knew I knew she was not my mother. And you don't know how to articulate that at 5 and 6, that thank you for offering that to me, but I don't want to call you mama. I want my own mama. It's not the same. And I don't think she understand it wasn't coming from a place to hurt her, but I was still dealing with the grief of my father's death, not even understanding that I was dealing with that grief. And nobody, there was no one to talk to. Nobody told me that he was gone, dead. They just said, "Your dad's gone." I just remember him being gone and then never coming back. And that's impacted a lot of decisions that I've made with men in my life, but that's another life for another day. So I do look a whole lot like my father. I'm the spitting image of my father. I'm the female version of him. Um, and I that goes to show that's important, because I know that when my aunt looked at me, I don't believe that she was really viewing me as a person, a separate person from my father. I think when she looked at me, she simply saw my father. She didn't see me, because they never got along. Other family members have told me that my aunt was extremely jealous of my father, very jealous of him. They fought, they argued. There was physical, there was physical fights, on, and it was a lot of dysfunction, because this was a dysfunctional family system, you understand. So, and I also understand it's the orphan spirit operating in my aunt, whereas her father was not around, and my grandfather was my dad's dad, but not her dad. And she probably felt that sense of rejection, even though I can honestly say with 100% certainty that my grandfather saw no difference. He accepted her as his blood daughter and loved her fiercely as such, as he had her since she was 3 years old. And but that's emptiness when your parent is not there. I can understand, how this type of rejection of her birth father not being in the picture kind of turned her into somebody very mean spirited, someone very hostile, someone very just honestly just downright cruel. I remember everything that I ever did. Like I was in the fifth grade. I won the spelling bee. I always did my homework. I was a straight A student, and she would call me names, call me stupid girl, and wouldn't get my hair done. I had very long hair. I've always had. I just cut it now, but I've always had long hair, and she would purposely not get my hair done so that it would all fall out. She wouldn't, my grandfather would give her money for my clothes and things. She would take the money and use it and on my cousin, her daughter, and I would go to school and wouldn't have clothes, holes in my shoes. Um and would, as I got older, would just say the meanest things. Like I would be innocently eating an ice cream cone, and she would snicker to my cousin, her daughter, and say, "Oh, she's gonna be really good at what when she gets older." And I didn't know what they were talking about, but I knew it wasn't something appropriate. I could feel it wasn't appropriate, even though I didn't understand exactly what they were talking about. And as I grew up, I remember the jealousy honestly came to, it got worse and worse. The emotional abuse, it got worse. She tried to physically abuse me as well. She would whoop me, for the smallest minute things. And but the thing is, I knew it was wrong, and I've never been one to accept, like, you could beat on me psychologically and emotionally, but what I never stood for is somebody putting their hands on me. And even at that age, I wasn't going to stand for that. I wasn't going to let her do that. So I remember she gave me a whooping one time for something very minuscule. Whooped me so bad that I have a scar on my ankle where she whooped me so bad that it drew blood and caused an open wound. And I remember crying and crying and crying for about 3 or 4 hours straight. She whooped me, and it was about 9 or 10. I stayed crying. I mean, I wouldn't stop crying till 3 a.m. in the morning. And the reason why is because I was so filled with grief. Number one, I was so filled with grief and shame. Why? Because I couldn't understand why she had whooped me so bad for no reason. It seemed senseless to me. But also, I cried and cried and cried because I wanted anyone to come and just hold me and show me affection. I just remember wanting love so bad, and not understanding what I had done to deserve her hating me so much. And I remember, and she knew what I wanted. She knew what I needed. Because I remember her coming into the room and getting into bed with me and holding me and hushing me until I fell asleep and went quiet and became quiet. And she only did it so that I would be quiet. She knew that was the only way for me to become quiet, was if she gave me the love and affection that she should have been giving me all along. So let's get into, I'm 13 years old. I live with her again. She's manipulated me into living with her again. Honestly, because I believe that she wanted the Social Security check. I got survivor benefits, death survivor benefits off of my dad. And if she knew if she had me, she would get that check. And my grandfather would give it all to her. He didn't need it. He had lots of money. He had bread. And so she convinced me. She said, if you come and stay with me, I'll get your hair done. You'll go shopping. I'll give you clothes. I'll buy you a puppy. Any and everything she could get. Cause I don't know why she wanted me with her so bad. Because in retrospect, it wasn't even that much money. So I think it was a combination of loneliness on her part. But things began to change when her now husband entered into the picture. And everything changed. I think we were kind of, maybe I was beginning to get peace over at her house that I couldn't get with my grandfather at that time, because my grandfather's abuse was getting to a point where the psychological abuse had morphed into him trying to put his hands on me. And it stemmed from his misogyny of women, from his own childhood issues stemming from his mother. And as I became and grew into a woman, I don't think he saw his granddaughter. I think he saw another low down dirty bitch who he had to control. And I know this for a fact because I could be like grandpa. He'd come in, "What are you doing? What are you doing?" Tisa, which was my nickname. I say, "Grandpa," as some teenagers, they get moody, they get attitudes. I'm like, "I don't want to be bothered right now." And he would just fly off the handle. "Well, FUBITCH," and slam doors. Like, I guess he felt rejected, but it wasn't about that. It was just the fact that I was dealing with depression. That's when the onset of my depression started. That was when the onset of me not understanding where's my father and trying to figure out and being left to figure out how he really died all on my own. And the Holy Spirit giving me that information so that I wouldn't lose my mind totally. And it hurt me. It hurt me. I'm dealing with anger, all this anger and frustration and sadness. And I'm a teenager at that. My hormones are just, I'm starting to feel emotions that I really don't understand. So that's how I ended up with my aunt. But as soon as, like I said, she met her now husband and she began to change. She didn't really need my company anymore. She was essentially discarding me is how I took it, because as soon as he came into the picture, the abuse got really, 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 really intense as soon as he came into the picture. And it came to a head one day when I was 13. And I don't even, honestly, to this day, I don't understand what the fight was about. Because sometimes she would come into my room and just start things with me, and nothing had happened. I had done nothing, and she would just start arguments and start cussing me out and start calling me names like worthless. "You're not nothing. You're not SHIT. You're going to end up just like your dad. You're going to be a prostitute. You're going to be dead." And she would say all these things to me. So I remember the time that one night when it happened, we were living in an apartment complex in Indianapolis called Brendan Way. If you from Naptown, you know Brendan Way. And then they changed the name to the Cottages of Fall Creek. And now it's something else now. But if you from Naptown, you know Brendan Way. And so I was already at that point. My grandpa had a girlfriend named Mamie who was a social worker. So she had helped him get me into therapy. So I'm already on antidepressants at 13, which I don't know if that was really the answer, but I was on them anyways. And I remember the argument with my aunt or whatever. And I think there were other people in the house. It might have been my cousin. And even she, and my cousin was an abuser of me too, but even she was like, "This is senseless. Like, mama, leave her alone." I remember her kind of like telling her, like, "You need to leave her alone. Like, you need to stop." And I think it was more so because of the noise that my auntie was making. It might not have even been because my cousin had genuine concern for her, but she understood that there was a lot of racket being caused, and it can bring the police. Because Brendan Way was hood, so you might not call the police, but somebody else might call the police. So I remember just feeling so in that moment, like helpless, I just wanted to escape her abuse by any means necessary. Like, I didn't know what to, I just wanted to get away somehow, some way. And I remember telling her, if you hate me so much, then I probably should just kill myself. And I remember her with this evil, demonic look on her face. She turns around and gets my antidepressants, a full bottle of antidepressants, and said, "Here, you wanna kill yourself? Take these. I don't give a fuck. Take them." And I looked at her, and I just felt hopeless in that moment. Like, man, she really do hate my guts. Maybe I should die. Maybe I don't need to be here. I don't want to be here. I remember really not wanting to live in that moment. So out of not knowing what else to do, I took the pills from her and I put them all in my mouth. And then she went to take them out of my mouth. But like I said, by this point, a ruckus had been caused. And all I know is that the police were called. And I don't know what she told the police, but all I know is that I ended up going away in handcuffs. I ended up going away in handcuffs, and she looked at me, and I can remember, and I could see her, and the policeman's back was turned, and she looked and she smirked. She smirked at me, and I just felt like I knew she had told lies on me. Because if the truth had got out about what she had done, she would have been the one in handcuffs. But my voice was shut up. My it was like my throat was closed. I didn't know what to say to the police because she's this grown up and I'm this kid, and who's gonna believe me, and how do I even begin to tell her that she's been treating me like this for years and years? Her and my cousin, my grandfather. I didn't know how to tell. I didn't know what to say. All I know is they took me to an inpatient behavioral health facility, and I remember just joking and clowning around. I really literally wouldn't even participate in therapy because I felt like I didn't deserve to be there. So I never took none of the groups seriously. I just wanted to forget somehow that I was in this place and that this was a nightmare and that it would somehow all end. Um, I remember my grandpa coming to visit me in the inpatient facility. None of the, no, it's like nobody, none of the counselors, none of the therapists on the floor, even kind of, not even the psychiatrist really asked me what had happened. It's like they bought my aunt's story hook, line, and sinker. I'm just this crazy, mentally disturbed preteen, and let's just get her stabilized, and she needs to be in here. And nobody delves deeper except my grandpa. I remember him sitting me down away from everybody because it's not like jail. The inpatient facility is not like jail. Your people can come and y'all sit on the couch, y'all talk, y'all touch. And he asked me real low under his breath, he said, "Tell me what really happened. Tell me what happened." And I don't know what made him say that, but it's like me and my grandfather, no matter how much we fought or how many disagreements we got in, he could always somehow, some way, I would always he was always able to break my wall down and get the truth out of me. And I told him what really happened. The mask came off, and I told him what my aunt did. And I remember him looking with disbelief in his face, anger, disbelief, shock. He was speechless. And he shook his head, and he dropped his head, and I heard him say, "I should have never let you leave me. I should have never let you go," is what he said. And he said, "You're coming home with me." And so that was one of two, three, four times of that cycle where I would go back and forth. So for a couple years, I stayed with my grandpa, and things were better in a lot of ways, and things were worse in a lot of ways. And that felt so good to get that off my chest. Sometimes in these situations, there are no easy answers. Sometimes there are no happy endings. In that moment in time, I did need a rescuer, and Grandpa did rescue me. But in rescuing me, in that same act, he still protected my auntie. And I'm not mad at my grandpa. And I'm not mad at my auntie even, believe it or not. So honestly, when I think back on and look at these stories that I tell, the cycle only stops when we stop it. There's not no knight in shining armor out there waiting to rescue you. And I believed that for many years, and the men that I chose, thinking that if just one of these men would love me, that it would erase all the pain that I had been through. So I took more abuse, reenacting the trauma, trying to just get the abuse story right. And it never ever worked. It only created more trauma on this hamster wheel that I found myself on, until I learned how to surrender, until I gave this pain to the Lord. And that's the reason why I tell my story about what my auntie did when she told me to commit suicide. I'm telling it not to point a finger at her, because I know at the end of the day is God's will be done and vengeance is the Lord's. But this shame that I felt for so long, this is not my shame to bear. What she did to me is not my fault. I don't know what stuff she had inside of her that would make her do that to a 13-year-old. I don't know. I don't even pretend to understand, because I don't. Not even to this day. But when I learned how to give it to the Lord, He might not have provided all the answers that I wanted, but I can tell you right now, in the very act of telling you guys this right now, it's provided me with a level of peace that I've never felt in all my years, just letting it go, just sitting it down. And I think that might be what forgiveness is about, just setting it down and walking away from it, and committing to yourself, you know what happened, it did happen. You know, I'm not going to ignore it that it happened. I'm not going to try to get over it. I'm just going to get through this. And I know there's purpose in my pain, or God would have never said He was going to give me beauty for my ashes. If I hadn't went through what I've been through, I would have never had the strength to tell my story to somebody else, so that somebody else can get the lesson in what I went through. And the lesson is Genesis 50:20. Whew, praise be to God. Because even though I know they may have meant it for my bad, but God, He meant it for my good, so that His people could be fed. And this is why I get on YouTube, to feed the people, to let them know that you're not your story. You're not the sum of all your traumas, that you can set it down and actually find healing in your story. There's power in that. That's why I refuse to stay silent. Not no more. God still works on my heart day by day, forgiving not only my auntie, but her daughter, but her husband, my grandfather, my daddy, my mother, and so many other countless people who did terrible things to me. And me having to forgive myself for the terrible things I did to myself. What I put me through because I didn't love me. I didn't know how to. I didn't know what it was. Not until God showed me. Not until He showed me how to love me. And loving me day by day is giving me the strength to forgive those who hurt me. Not because they deserve it or don't deserve it, but because God loved me. Because God loved me. And He still is showing me His marvelous works even now. And He's showing me how to put one foot in front of the other, because God promised me that my latter days will be better than my former. And I feel so light and so free right now telling this story, because we overcome by the power of our testimonies. And so that's the end of my story of how my aunt told me to commit suicide when I was 13 years old. It hurt me, and it wasn't right what she did. But God still somehow, some way, is, was, and will get the glory out of my story. This is Charisma, and this is my healing journey. Peace.